Uh, my name is Ed Ryder, and I am a volunteer for Senator Grassley's veterans interviews. And tell me your name.
Sure, I'm Mark Hunt.
Mark Hunt?
Yep, M-A-R-K, last name Hunt, H-U-N-T.
H-U-N-T, great.
Sure.
And where were you born?
I was born in Iowa City, Iowa in 1973.
1973. You anticipated my next question.
Yeah.
And you're currently living in Bettendorf?
I do. I live in Bettendorf, and I work for the city of Bettendorf, Iowa as well.
And what do you do for Bettendorf?
I'm the director of community development, so all building, planning, zoning, all that work kind of falls underneath my department.
Oh, well, then you work quite closely with Jeff Ryder.
I do work very closely with Jeff Ryder. Like I said, he's kind of a rock star.
Jeff's my nephew, that's why
Yeah,
I said.
yeah, we mentioned that earlier off camera. Jeff is great.
Yeah. Anyway, and tell me, first off, what are your parents' name?
Yeah, my dad is Edwin Hunt, and my mom is Bonnie K. Hunt.
Cool. And what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was in education. He taught school and then became a special educator and specialized in helping children with special needs and worked through the Iowa area education agencies in that fashion.
Great, great. And your mom, did she work?
My mom worked. She sold real estate, taught real estate, and worked in banking as well.
Great, great. And are you married?
I am married, yep.
And do you have kids?
I have 2 kids and 2 grandchildren.
2 kids and 2 grandkids?
Yeah.
Oh.
I got a baby face. I'm 50 years old almost. So.
Well, I'm only 40. So
Oh, I see. Yeah, I could tell. I thought that right when I met you.
I'm 40 for the 32nd time. Anyway, it's getting to be an old joke. The what's your wife's name?
Jennifer, or Jen, I call her Jen Hunt.
Jen?
Yeah.
And what does she do?
She works in banking. She actually works for a local bank. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. And your kids, both of them, are out of the house
Yeah,
now?
grown out of the house. I got a 26-year-old and a 21-year-old. The oldest is my daughter Julia. The youngest is my son Ethan. They both live in Nebraska. Can't blame them for that, but I wish they'd come back to Iowa.
Well, it's sometimes it's nice.
Yeah.
But do they both have kids or?
So Julia has 2 children with my future son-in-law Alex.
Yep.
So Riker is my grandson. He's 6. Has the same birthday as me. So we share the same birthday as my grandson. And my granddaughter Esme is 4.
Great,
She just had her 4th birthday here at the end of October.
Well, tell me a little bit about your education. And you were where you go to high school in Iowa City?
No, I actually grew up in the Bettendorf Pleasant Valley area.
Oh, okay.
I graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in 1992. Went off to did some community college for a few term or 2, and then decided to join the United States Coast Guard in June of 1993.
Oh, okay. You're a veteran of the Coast Guard.
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. And I was an enlisted man. You can call me.
Oh yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
What did you do in the Coast Guard?
Back when I joined the Coast Guard, they required everyone to come in as a non-rate. If you're an enlisted person, which I wasn't enlisted, you came in as a non-rate. So you had to work for a year or 2 on a ship or a cutter, as we call them in the Coast Guard, a small boat station, perhaps at an air station, and then you went to your A school or your MOS school after that. So everybody spent a year or 2 in the field. Now they have direct A school or direct MOS school. So my first 2 years were spent approximately on the United States Coast Guard cutter Swivel. It's a little 65-foot. It's decommissioned now. Actually, I was part of the last crew. It's decommissioned now. 65-foot ice-breaking tugboat, and its job was in Maine to, in the wintertime, keep the ports open for lobstermen, and more importantly, or as importantly, I should say, for fuel ships to come in up into port and dock and offload fuel, because everybody uses what's called bunker C fuel or fuel oil to heat their homes in New England, and those ships can't get through those ice-covered waters.
Yeah. The where did you take your boot camp?
Cape May, New Jersey. It's only one Coast Guard boot camp. It's in Cape May, New Jersey. Yep.
Cape May,
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. And after, do you have any fond memories of boot camp?
Well, boot camp's boot camp. Even Coast Guard boot camp is just boot camp. So when I was in Coast Guard boot camp, the way they ran boot camp back then is there was regular boot camp and there was ceremonial detail. And believe it or not, I used to be thinner and taller and perhaps relatively handsome at one point, and so I was volunteered for ceremonial duty boot camp. And then if you were in ceremonial duty boot camps, so many of those graduates then were selected to go to be on Coast Guard Honor Guard. I did not get selected to be on Coast Guard Honor Guard, although I kind of wanted to. I did not get that selection, and so then I went into the regular enlisted ranks. But yeah, so I did. I was Victor 142 was my boot camp graduating class. Victor 142, and then we were ceremonial detail was my piece of that. So twirled rifle, did special presentations of the colors, things like that. More of an honor guard type role.
Yeah.
It made boot camp even more fun, believe it or not.
Yeah, I bet it would. It's something different than
Something different.
Yeah.
So we were held to even a higher standard than our regular boot camp friends.
Yeah.
So
You said you were on the cutter swivel.
yeah, Coast Guard cutter swivel, little 65-foot ice-breaking tugboat. Kind of a dream job because don't take this the wrong way, all you officers out there, but the highest ranking person was a chief, was an E7.
Yeah.
So very, very, very rarely do you have a cutter. Only the 65-foot class that I know of actually has an E7 as the captain of the boat, if you will.
Chief.
Yeah.
But he's more than a chief. He's a senior chief or.
Yeah, E6. So it might have been E6 chief. He became senior chief while I was there, but you only had to be chief to have that captain status on the 65-foot class.
Yeah. And you mentioned rate for our non-Navy Coast Guard people. Talk a little bit about what is meant by a rate.
Yeah, a rate basically means you have a job specialty within the military, so that is your rating. Could be a mechanic, could be an aviation specialist, something like that. It's an enlisted job title, and like I said, when I joined the Coast Guard, the motto was, or the process was, you were non-rated for 2 years, so you worked as a seaman, fireman, or an airman, and then you went and got your rate or went to A school at that point. So I did that for 2 years, and I did go to public affairs A school.
Public affairs rate. That's where. So you were in public relations and
I was
for the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting actually.
Yeah.
So.
Were you as in public relations then? Where were you stationed at?
Well, again, boot camp was Cape May, New Jersey. Coast Guard cutter swivel was in Rockland, Maine. I was there. We decommissioned the swivel. It was replaced by the Coast Guard cutter tackle, and I was on the last crew and the last cruise of the Coast Guard cutter swivel. I sailed the tackle back up to Rockland from Baltimore, where we decommissioned the swivel, and then right about that time, I was selected for A school. So our A school is Defense Information School, so it's one A school for all the public affairs specialists across the military. So Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Navy, they all go to the same one. It's called DINFOS, or Defense Information School, in Fort Meade, Maryland.
Oh, okay, cool.
And being a Coast Guard guy on an Army base is a unique experience.
Yeah, I bet it is. After you graduated then from your rate school, where did you go after that, and what did you do?
Yeah, the Coast Guard sent me first to St. Louis, Illinois, which you wouldn't even, or St. Louis, Missouri, I'm sorry, which you wouldn't even think was the Coast Guard station, but that was the headquarters of the old 2nd Coast Guard District, a geographic area within the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
The 2nd Coast Guard District actually was decommissioned and absorbed by the 8th Coast Guard District. So I helped, yet again, decommission another Coast Guard unit. So I helped decommission the 2nd Coast Guard District as a public affairs specialist. And then I was stationed, from there I had kind of prime choice because I had such a short assignment. I was there less than a year. So I kind of had first choice of where I would go, and Alaska came up. I'd been in Maine. I loved Maine. Cold weather doesn't bother me. I love the North Woods. I thought, well, Alaska might be fun. So I did, after St. Louis, I did go to Alaska, and it was amazing.
How long were you there?
A little over 3 years in Alaska. I want to say 3.5 years stationed in Juneau, Alaska, working for the 17th Coast Guard District as a public affairs specialist. At the time, the last in charge there was Admiral Cross, who became Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Terry Cross, a pretty amazing individual.
Yeah. What was the highest rank that you achieved while you were in?
E5 Petty Officer Second Class.
Okay. And the your what was your total time then in the Coast Guard?
Like 7 years. So 1993 to 2000, June 1993 to June of 2000. Yep.
And once
7
you-
years active. Yep.
7 years active duty, and that sounds like you had an interesting time in the Coast Guard, though.
Yeah, I did. Being in Maine as a non-rate on the Coast Guard Cutter Swivel, ice operations, keeping ports open was an important mission, but also you just saw the world from a perspective that most people don't see it.
Yeah.
I was in Acadia National Park, beautiful national park every day. That was basically our area of operation. So seeing the wildlife and the beauty of our country, and then also serving in a peacetime fashion in a very important role, was amazing for me. I don't have a lot of drug interdiction, combat experience, those things that you see on the news.
Yeah.
People do those things. I did not personally do those, but I was part of the mission support, if you will.
Yep.
We did have every Coast Guard asset is also a rescue asset. So we did have one rescue that I was involved in while I was on the swivel. I was a young 21-year-old guy. We were actually anchored out for kind of a show the flag kind of day. It was a beautiful summer day. There were Maine and New England has all these tall ships, these old schooners and sailboats, and it was kind of a schooner sailboat day for some small community. We were anchored out just showing the Coast Guard flag and just kind of being present. And there was a heart attack on a nearby sailboat, and I was deployed on a Coast Guard small boat out to the sailboat. Just a newly trained Coast Guard kid, 21 years old maybe, and was able to get on board. Found the individual and gave him rescue breathing and CPR to the best of my ability, and he did not live. And his daughter stood behind me and said, "Don't die, Daddy."
Oh boy, that's rough.
And so that was at 21 years old, and it's still,
Still,
I don't feel like a failure. It's not that, but you want to be the right person at the right time.
yeah.
And so that happened, and it made me realize where my Coast Guard career would go, because there are people that can do that and they can be unfazed by it. I cannot. I'm not that individual, but I still love my country and love my service.
Yeah. You sounds like you had a good career, though.
I did. I had a great career. Yeah.
There. And we all had experiences where we weren't the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
And so I understand where you're going from that.
Yeah.
After you got out of the Coast Guard, where'd you go from there?
After the Coast Guard, I returned home to the Quad Cities, and I finished my schooling at Augustana College. I have a degree in geography from Augustana College. I got into kind of city government and local planning, city planning, and I did that and have had that career ever since. And now, I work for the city of Bettendorf as basically the community development director. So all the city planners and all those folks work for me.
How long have you been with the city of Bettendorf?
Just 3 years for the city of Bettendorf. I've been in the Quad City community since I came back in 2000. So I've been working in this fashion basically for 23 years now.
Yeah. With 3 years in Bettendorf.
3 years in Bettendorf. Yeah.
That's interesting. Can you tell me about something that you learned or an experience that you had while you were in the Coast Guard that applies to your the last 23 years that
absolutely.
you've been working? Something that applied that you gained from the Coast Guard that
yeah, absolutely. For sure, 100%. And I would say I credit the U.S. Coast Guard and the United States Army, because that was Defense Information School where I learned I had a skill set, and they helped me polish it for writing, talking to the media, talking to people, making them understand our mission. And I use that same skill set today for the city of Bettendorf, and I've used it in all my jobs. I tell people the U.S. Army taught me to write and speak, believe it or not, and that might sound cliche or silly, maybe is a better term, but they really helped me become a really good communicator in a professional way, and it's served my career immensely. So
that's great. I got
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
senior moment
Yeah,
there,
no
a
worries.
brain fog. In your, if you had one thing to tell the future generations
Yeah.
that you something that you learned or experienced that you would want them to know, what would that be?
I would want them to know that serving gives you something that you don't necessarily know you're getting while you're getting it. I've been the guy on a ship, on a cutter, just wanting to get home and be done. And you've been out for a few weeks and you're just like, get me off this boat. And that is a huge sacrifice. You're not having the same life that maybe your friends who are off in college are having, where they can maybe go freely and go out and hang out with friends. You have to be there, you have to support the mission, you have to do the job. But going through it, and then, it's not all fun and games. If you join the military, it is not all fun and games. But if you go through it and you serve, and you go through that experience, you're receiving something that will serve you in civilian life. At least it has for me, where I think you have a much better devotion to duty, devotion to your job, devotion to your family, because you're in the Coast Guard or any military service. The people you work with become your family. You live on a cutter with a few dudes. You get real close real quick, whether you want to or not, and you're going to have to figure out ways to get along. And so I just think that service has more than a paycheck, more than benefits, more than GI Bill. It has this other thing where it builds your character, it builds you, and you can then use that skill set as a civilian.
The you enlisted in the Coast Guard.
I did, yeah.
And why the Coast Guard and not the Navy?
Really, I looked at both. I was a landlubber. I was from Iowa. I'd never seen the ocean. I figured if I'm going to do, 4 or 5 years in the military, I want to see the ocean. I knew that's something that was just attractive to me. I also didn't know I got seasick rather easily. But the Coast Guard had this broad mission where, you could be a military hard charger guy, law enforcement, military mission stuff. If you wanted to do that, you could be a lifesaver. You could be someone that was working in environmental response. So the Coast Guard had this really broad mission, and that really appealed to me because my personality, as you could probably tell, is I'm pretty thin-skinned. I'm a pretty soft guy. I don't necessarily, I'm glad we got guys on the front line. I'm not a frontline kind of guy. I would do whatever I could, but I knew that there was a mission within there that I could fulfill. Yeah. And the U.S. Coast Guard has one of the broadest missions, and it's one of the smallest services. Yeah. So if you care about the environment, if you care about drug interdiction, you care about law enforcement, you care about border security, the United States Coast Guard does all of those things. It also has a military mission that is exemplary, and I'm very proud of that too.
Good. Have you ever had any thoughts of, after you got out of the Coast Guard, going back in?
A few times I thought about that and kind of dabbled with it. I actually had on my contract with the government, I had an 8-year contract, 4 years active, 4 years inactive. Now I did 7 years, so I only had 1 year inactive left. And I thought about doing Coast Guard Reserve, but that was really hard to do where I was located here in the Quad Cities. And then I thought about doing Army National Guard, which I did do for a few months, but then I just went back onto inactive reserve because the connections weren't there. The military that I had grown up with and learned wasn't not that it was less, it just wasn't what I knew. Yeah. And so, I thought about it, but I never actually did that. Yeah.
Are you involved in any veterans organizations here in the Quad Cities?
I'm not. I do some stuff on Facebook with what's called the Coast Guard Tug Association. So everybody who served on a tug of any type in the Coast Guard, we have some camaraderie and stuff on Facebook. I don't actively involve myself in local veterans issues, other than I do pay attention to them when I vote, and I do participate in certain charities, but I'm not active in one locally.
Have you continued any friendships with the people you served with? Do you still have contacts?
I do through Facebook. We are all literally all over the world now. Like one of the guys I worked with in Alaska, he's in Italy. He had family in Italy, and after he retired, he went to Italy, and so he lives in Italy. So I get to see him on Facebook, but not locally.
For your time in Alaska, Did you have a lot of interaction with the locals up there?
Yeah, a ton, because I was in public affairs. I was working with local media, local citizens all the time, telling the Coast Guard story, trying to make sure everybody knew what the United States Coast Guard was doing to keep them safe, secure, and protect their country every night. And so I did have a lot of interaction. And then I also I volunteered in the community as well. I was a baseball coach. I didn't have kids yet when I was up there, so I had a little bit of time to do stuff like that, and I wasn't deployed on the ship. And so just had a lot of interactions and a lot of good friendships, actually.
Yeah. See, how long have you been married?
Well, I've been married twice, so I'm on my second marriage. I was married 15 years the first time, took a little break, remarried a different lady, and just had 10 years last month.
That's cool. I similar story for myself. I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you attended any veterans reunions at all?
Not veterans reunions specifically. Now, the city of Rock Island did host kind of a what they called Mission Mighty Mississippi River event. That was a Coast Guard specific event down at Schwiebert Park in Rock Island, which kind of led me to here today. And so I did attend that on behalf of the city of Bettendorf and Mayor Gallagher's office because he couldn't make it, but to show our support for the United States Coast Guard and the mission they actually have on the river, which is mainly a commerce and making sure that barges and ships that are operating on the river are safely operating. And so the U.S. Coast Guard has a huge mission there. And we do have a small detachment, Marine Safety Detachment here in the Quad Cities. And so I was able to attend that event and then see just, all the coasties come to town and Dolphin helicopter and small boats, things that I operated on, worked on, and especially as a non-rate when I was before as a public affairs specialist. And it was just almost felt like I hadn't left. It just felt like I was home, and it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was a very good feeling.
That's good. That's great. You mentioned the mayor couldn't go. Was he in the Coast Guard?
Mayor Gallagher wasn't. All the local mayors were invited to attend to support this.
Okay.
Mayor Gallagher couldn't make it that weekend. He knew I was a Coast Guard veteran, although I'm much farther down the totem pole within the city than the mayor. He gave me the honor of attending on his behalf, and I was really happy to do it.
Sure.
Got to meet Admiral Lundy, the Atlantic Area Commander. He actually knew Terry Cross, my last commander of the 17th Coast Guard District, who became Vice Commandant. So I got to have kind of a little reconnection, if you will. But I got to attend on behalf of the city of Bettendorf.
That'd be great. So, how has your service in the Coast Guard impacted you as far as your feelings about the military in general and about war combat?
I think anybody who's served in any capacity knows that whether you're an airman, soldier, sailor, you're there, one, for your country, and two, for the guy next to you. And it doesn't matter if you've been in combat or not. If we're in high seas and we got to go out on deck, I'm making sure that you're safe and you're making sure that I'm safe. And I've been there, not in combat, but I've been in rough seas. And that same anecdote follows through. So I really appreciate the military service. I'm certainly not pro-war. I am pro-military, and I am pro having a strong military to defend our country and protect it in all ways possible. But then I also understand the camaraderie that is there between those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen and women. And I think about that when we deploy them. I know it's necessary. I know it's generally, I think, the right thing to do. And I just know how much they care for each other when they're out in the field.
This would be the last question
Sure.
here. What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
I wish a couple of things. One, I think there's a lot of veterans issues that need looked at, from healthcare, mental health care, especially for veterans, housing. Veterans have a higher rate of some things like suicide and perhaps addiction than maybe the general population. And I think those are really important issues. But there's also another side that your veterans are also your people who are working at your local city or working as police officers and firefighters now who are very effective in helping your community. So we do have veterans that have issues that need help, and we've got to get to them, and we've got to find ways to help them. A large number also are the ones who are, your local police officer, your local firefighter, the butcher behind the counter at your grocery store. And so I think we got to be careful not only telling the bad story about veterans who do need our help, because while we got to solve that problem, we have so many veterans that come back and serve and are so effective in our community.
Yep. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Is there anything that I have not asked you that you would like me to ask you?
I don't think so. I just think that it's the appreciation for the opportunity, and then the appreciation to, honestly, for me to think back about my service and think about things I don't think about very often. Obviously, there's one that still always will be with me. And so I appreciate that. There's something cathartic about it.
Yeah.
So,
Great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I didn't, when we get off camera, I got a couple of things.